done.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Carl Szabo, I'm Vice President General Counsel at NetChoice. My father's entire family lives in South Bend, Indiana, so unfortunately, we don't really have a good basketball team right now to root for here, but hoping to do so well. So speaking of my dad is kind of a Luddite. I love him to death, but he was taking my son to a game this past weekend, and I am on the phone with him, and he's trying to figure out how to get this digital ticket onto his device. And eventually it gets to the point where I have to have him take my mother's phone so I can FaceTime, have him point my mother's phone at his screen, and walk him through something as simple as press the home button, because he doesn't know what the home button is. Or it says, you need to put in your fingerprint. He's tapping the screen. I'm like, no, not there. And we all have stories like that. It's exceptionally frustrating. Unfortunately, the only place you could get these tickets was through the Ticketmaster app. And one of the things that we're talking about here is choice and opportunity. If the only place in the future, which it sounds like a lot of the people who spoke before me want to go, the only way that he could possibly ever get a ticket is through the Ticketmaster app. Which means not only is this going to be an exceptionally frustrating user experience for most people, as Ticketmaster has no incentive to improve their app if they have no competition, it's going to be an exceptionally frustrating process for me and many of the tech-savvy kids out there who are just trying to help their parents figure out how to use these devices. Now, I may sound a little bit flustered because I feel like my head's about to explode. This is such a simple bill. I'm just utterly amazed. Two fundamental questions before you. One, do you control your tickets, or does the venue control your tickets after you buy them? And two, should deceptive sites be allowed? To me, the answer is you control your tickets once you bought them, and deceptive sites shouldn't be allowed. That makes this a pretty simple bill. You've heard a lot of complaints about PDFs and the fraud involved in paper tickets. And maybe it's the law professor in me that just also is about to explode here. But I ask, have you read the bill? The word paper does not appear anywhere. The hard word PDF does not appear anywhere in the bill. If the venues want to maintain an exclusively electronic system, they can. All we're saying is, if somebody wants to transfer it on their service of choice, they can. We heard complaints about, well, what about if somebody is causing a ruckus at the concert? I can't throw them out under this bill. Once again, the law professor means like, did you read the bill? The word solely is prominently displayed. So meaning the discrimination. You can't say to somebody because they're coming in, oh, that's a transfer ticket, get out. You can't do that. But if somebody comes in with a fake ticket, see ya. If somebody's causing a ruckus, out the door. So once again, the complaints are, did you read the bill? A constant refrain we heard was, it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary. I think almost everyone opposing the bill has used the phrase, it's an unnecessary bill. There's a lot of heavyweight in this room. You don't send the senior vice president of Live Nation for a bill that's unnecessary, that's going to have no impact on your bottom line. For that, you maybe send your local lobbyist. You don't send an SVP for something like that. This is very necessary because clearly there's a lot more planned for Indiana fans and Indiana consumers than meets the eye. Some of the other things that truly amazed me was you have public venues, taxpayer-funded venues, coming in and saying, our rights supersede those of Indiana citizens. And to me, that's just amazing. That's just amazing. You are here at the luxury, at the will of the people. And it's your job as legislators to uphold that will of the people. So at the end of the day, who do we hold more paramount? Are we worried about New York artists who continue to show up in every state where these laws have passed unanimously in Utah? It's in Colorado. It's in Connecticut. It's in Virginia. It's in New York. So do we worry about the Manhattanite artists, or do we worry about Indiana fans? Do we worry about the interests of taxpayer venues, or do we worry about Indiana fans? And of course, one of the secret pieces of this whole equation is Live Nation owns Ticketmaster. So when you're hearing from Live Nation or any Ticketmaster-owned venue, you're hearing from all the same companies. And that's really what this is all about. Ticketmaster is the largest primary ticket seller in the world. Live Nation is the largest concert promoter in the world. They recently got caught in violation of a consent decree with the Department of Justice for stuff that they shouldn't be doing. And if they're going to break an agreement with the US Department of Justice, I loathe to think the steps that they would take for an Indiana fan, especially those of lower income. And at the end of the day, it's a simple bill. It makes sense, it protects fans, and according to everyone in opposition, they have no real complaints because it's unnecessary. So there's no reason why you shouldn't pass this bill. And I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Very, very interesting comments. Where do you teach law at?
George Mason Law School, or the George Mason Antonin Scalia Law School in Virginia. And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
a question about bots, what they are. So essentially, what used to happen back in the day is somebody would write a piece of computer software. And if you've gone through a checkout and it says, I am a human being, and it's like, where are the cars? And you click the button. That's an anti-bot device. It's trying to make sure that you're a human. Bots are the computer software that gets around that. Now, about 4 or 5 years ago, and this was discussed during the summer session, Congress passed a law to make the use of bots illegal. And your state AG can actually enforce that law today. So to the extent that bots are a problem, the good news is we have laws on the books that already address it. It's already illegal today. And nothing in this bill will make it any easier because, once again, read the bill. Lawfully transferred ticket is also in the legislation. This was carefully crafted. I mean, I'm sorry, I feel like Adam Vinatieri here, because the goalposts just keep getting moved further and further away.
Yeah, it's not good news, yeah.
Is that what happened?
I'm trying to stick up for him. It was a rough year. So that's what a bot is, and the good news is your AG can take an enforcement action today for anyone using this illegal software.
Representative Smaltz.
Mr. Szabo, what brought you here today, all the way from George Mason?
So my trade association represents free expression and free enterprise. And what you're seeing here is, and believe me, I believe in light touch government regulation for the most part, but there is a role of government, and you can go all the way back to the Federalist Papers for this. When a company has market power and abuses that market power to harm consumers, that's where we step in. What you're seeing now is a breakdown of the free market system because Live Nation and Ticketmaster are not content to just control the primary ticket sale. They want to control the secondary ticket sale market. And so that's why we're here, to make sure there's robust competition.
Who's we?
When people try to transfer tickets.
Who's we? Who do you, I see net, I think I can read net choice, right?
Correct, yes.
Who is net choice?
We're a trade association
Of who?
Businesses that support free enterprise and free expression. Our members do include StubHub, but our members also include services that you use every single day, like Etsy or HomeAway or who else? AOL.
But relevant to this issue, is it StubHub?
They are one of the ones who are interested in this, but at the end of the day,
Because Etsy probably didn't call you up and say, I want you to go to Indiana and testify on this bill.
no, but Etsy would call me up if somebody is trying to say you may not resell your clothes through an eBay marketplace. And that's what this is about at the end of the day.
Oh, okay, thanks.
You may need to hang around for our next bill that we're hearing as well. Sir, is this, you are here for the consumer. You're here to protect Hoosiers, is what I heard in your testimony, right?
So first of all, a lot of my family still lives in South Bend, Indiana. So for those of you from
Welcome
other parts
home.
of the state, don't hold me
Yes.
against it. Don't hold that against me. My grandfather worked at Studebaker, still closed down. So I'm here in part for them. I'm also here in part for the next business that wants to compete with Ticketmaster, and they can't because Ticketmaster won't let you resell anywhere but on their marketplace. Live Nation won't let a venue use a service other than Ticketmaster if they want to use a Live Nation artist. That's what they just got in trouble for with the Department of Justice. So that's what I'm also here for.
Committee, any further questions? Sir, thank you for coming and testifying.
Thank you.
Laura Dooley.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Laura Dooley. I'm the head of government relations for StubHub. We're the world's most trusted ticket marketplace. Happy to be here today to support this legislation. I actually think Ms. Williams said it best when she said she's here to oppose this legislation because it puts consumers before venues and artists. We're here to support this legislation because it does just that. It puts consumers before venues and artists. I want to take a step back and explain a couple of things we've talked about today because I think it may have gotten lost in some of the arguments that have been presented. But let's talk about the ticket industry. What does that industry look like right now? There's one player in that industry who dominates about 70 to 80% of every ticket that's initially sold. That's Ticketmaster. They ticket 79 out of the 93 major sports leagues. That's Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster is owned by Live Nation. Live Nation owns venues in Indiana and across the world. They promote artists, more than 400 worldwide. They promote concerts, and in that, they kind of have some control about where those concerts are going. It is a full system, vertically integrated company that is using technology to foreclose competition and limit consumer choice. Because not only is Ticketmaster in control of the first sale of tickets, but they also control second sales. They're in the secondary market through products like the NFL Ticket Exchange, the NBA Ticket Exchange, the NHL Ticket Exchange, TM Plus. That's a full circle Ticketmaster product. And what we're seeing today is the use of technology to essentially force consumers into the Ticketmaster ecosystem. Why it's important and why we're working on this, it's because Ticketmaster has publicly stated that by 2021, they want to go fully digital. So while we're hearing venues today say, we already offer paper tickets, we kind of are already in compliance, but we still oppose, we ask the question why? And it's because the future is quickly approaching us, where we're going to get to a fully digital market by 2021. That allows Ticketmaster to unilaterally decide in conjunction with their artist clients, who they also manage through Live Nation, whether that ticket will be transferable at all. There's been a lot of incidents recently that we've heard where tickets were elected to be completely non-transferable. Oh, by the way, they're also non-refundable, right? You buy it, you lose it if you can't go. Pearl Jam was mentioned. They're doing a tour across the US and Canada where their tickets are non-transferable. They do have an exchange if needed in those states for fans to kind of, work it out amongst themselves. But in those places like New York and Colorado that have laws on the books like the one we're debating today, Ticketmaster has said, great, we're going to let you transfer those tickets, and guess what? Your only option is to transfer them through us. So while they're transferable without choice. You have to go through the SafeTick system, which is Ticketmaster's system, and there's no hack around it. We try to hack around it by selling tickets on our site. Then we have to send all of our members to Ticketmaster, or all of our users to Ticketmaster to fulfill their tickets. We have to force our consumers to download the Ticketmaster app. It's completely within their control. And unfortunately, it's universally or unilaterally their decision. Consumers have no bargaining power in this negotiation. They either participate or they don't, based on the terms that are dictated to them. We've heard 1% of tickets are offered that are non-transferable. Over the interim session this summer, they said it was 5%. In the last 2 months, we've seen major events like the Black Keys in LA, Pearl Jam announce completely non-transferable tours. It seems to me that this incidence is rising, not essentially very limited like we've heard. Additionally, like we said, these other set of tickets, it's unclear to me today how many are only transferable through Ticketmaster apps, but we know by 2021 they'll all be only transferable through Ticketmaster apps. So we've heard what this bill does. It's fundamentally about choice. You have the choice to buy a ticket that's freely transferable across the platform of your choosing. That's the consumer's choice. That's what we're empowering consumers to do. Why does StubHub care about that? It helps us compete. At the very least, if a consumer is enabled to buy a transferable ticket and they can no longer go, they have the choice to pick us. Without that choice, we're out of this market at Ticketmaster's pure discretion. And that's concerning from a business standpoint. We fully believe that our business interests align with the consumer interest in this case. I want to talk about some of the other things that are in this bill. The deceptive URL provision is very important. This is something that StubHub has been advocating across the country. Those who participate in these deceptive URLs, we believe, give the industry a bad name. It's something that we want to stop, and so we're very happy to support that. Additionally, this notion that a ticket holder can't be penalized for transferring or reselling the ticket is also important. Just about 2 months ago, we saw an event in Los Angeles where ticket holders who had tickets that were purchased via StubHub were denied entry to the event, not just because the tickets were invalid. They refused to even scan the tickets. It had nothing to do with the validity of the tickets. This Live Nation venue refused to scan StubHub tickets, foreclosing our consumers from participating in this event. It was really unfortunate. We have a Fan Protect guarantee in place to make those consumers whole, where they'll get all of their money back. We try to go above and beyond and actually get them replacement tickets to the event, but as you can imagine, in this one we couldn't, because we could not get them in if they had the ticket from us. I also want to unpack a couple of the things we heard about why there's a lot of opposition to this bill. Artists won't come here is an argument we heard last year during this debate when this bill, this exact version of the bill, passed the House. It's been changed to won't be able to compete. I think there's a lot of reasons why that change has been made, probably because of the DOJ investigation. But it's the same claim. Artists won't compete. They won't come here with laws like this on the books. Let's talk about Post Malone. Post Malone was mentioned earlier. Guess where he's playing? New York, Colorado, Illinois, Virginia, Utah, all states that have this bill on the books. We actually went through and looked at the lineups for Bankers Life and several other arenas in the state. There's not an example of an artist that's coming to Indiana this year that isn't playing in a state that already has this on the books. I think that's important. We talked about fraud. I think over the summer session, we heard a lot about how those fraud numbers are incredibly low. And while any instance of fraud is unfortunate, there are tools to address it today. We shouldn't use fraud as a reason to justify anti-competitive or anti-consumer behavior. We also heard about security. In the case of VIP situations, it was also discovered at the hearing in the summer that there's actually no background checks that go into any of these VIP events. At least that's what was testified to in the summer interim committee. So this notion that there's enhanced security because they know the customer is really without a lot of merit if you're not screening who's coming to these events. The security happens at the door. It has nothing to do with transferability. And lastly, there are a couple of important exemptions that I would argue should go into this bill. The notion that, free tickets are given to boys and girls clubs or to charity events or to church groups. Those things can be protected. There's precedent for it. The New York law actually has laid out a series of set exemptions to the bill, which I think would be a great addition to this legislation if the sponsors would be open to it, and that's something that we would be happy to provide. So with that, I feel like I've talked for a while, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and we can try to unpack this Paul McCartney situation if you want. Just let me know if you want me to give it a try. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee discussion? Representative Smaltz.
You said something that I'm just wondering about. You said Pearl Jam
Yeah.
is announcing a non-transferable tour,
Yep.
right? Why do you have a problem with that?
Why do we have a problem with
So
it?
here, my question is this: it's their product. They're telling the buyer up front, if you want to be a willing buyer, it's under these conditions. Don't be a willing buyer, not.
Yeah, I think it's just a fundamental concern. We think it's an unfair term and condition to put on someone.
But it's
that
their
you're gonna-
product.
It's their product to sell the first time, and once you bought it and you've met the price that they've asked, we just fundamentally believe at that point it's your ticket.
But they
and you
didn't.
should be able to do what you
But
want
you
with
just
it.
said that the non-transferability was something you bought up front.
In some cases, it may be, but again, we think it's an unfair term. We also think that there's a lot of examples where government has kind of interfered to say what is and is not an unfair term when you're buying a ticket. In this instant, the customer has absolutely no bargaining power. They are just there to buy a ticket, and you're having these terms dictated to them unilaterally. I think this is part of the discussion today, is whether or not that's a fair term to put on consumers when they're participating in this market.
The fair term to put on somebody's product that they're selling.
For the first time, yeah. And then,
What do you mean by the first time?
They're selling the ticket to me as a consumer. I've purchased it. I pay them money. I'm not offered a refund. It's a non-refundable ticket.
But you knew that up front.
I knew that up front, but still, I think it's
You
fair.
think you shouldn't have to do that, even though they warned you.
Yeah, I think it's an unfair term.
All right, that's okay. We can disagree on that. We can be it's nice.
Representative Stutzman.
What, I appreciate your presentation. I'm just wondering, so going back to Representative Smaltz's question, what is the product that the consumer is purchasing? Is it the experience? I mean, the experience that they get access to that concert or that show? I mean, is that the product? I'm just wondering.
I think that's a fair question. I think that's they're purchasing the ticket, which gives them access to the experience of the show. So I think that's a fair.
And if they don't have a chance to experience that, they don't get the product, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, it seems to me like there should be some type of transferability if they're unable to use the ticket to be able to transfer that experience, which is actually the product, right?
I would agree. Yeah.
Okay.
I would also add, and this came up earlier, but we had a little bit of discussion about license versus property. I think you can understand my point of view. We won't get into it. But there's, again, examples of states that have legislated on this area that expressly say a ticket is a license. However, this is what needs to happen with the sale of a ticket to benefit consumers. That's how the New York law is drafted, and we can certainly pull that for any committee members that are interested in seeing it as well.
Can we get back to Representative Smoltz's non-transferable aspect? What platform is this band using?
Pearl Jam's using Ticketmaster.
Okay, so can we go back to my Paul McCartney example?
Sure.
So will consumers be paying more, you feel, because it's not transferable? I mean, is that kind of something that happened to me, the $200 to $400 to $800 to $1,200 to $1,800 ticket? Will they be paying more?
I think there's a lot there to think through. And, without having experience, I was fortunate to see Paul McCartney as well. I did not pay $800. I was lucky enough to get a ticket for less than face value, because that is something that also happens on the secondary market, where you can buy a ticket for less than it was originally paid for. Hasn't been mentioned today, but that is something that is a concern for folks who are against transferability. If they don't have the market to support the prices at which they've priced their tickets, and you can get it for cheaper somewhere else, guess where consumers are going to go? But if they can foreclose transferability, then consumers can't go anywhere. They have to pay the price that's been established. But looking at Paul McCartney, I think one of the things, to talk about bots, as Carl had said, bots are legal at the federal level. The tools are in place to enforce against bad actors. The other component that's very opaque to consumers, and I think something that hasn't really been addressed anywhere, although it is being considered in Congress right now, is this notion that there is no transparency into how many tickets are offered for sale at the various price points that are advertised. So this idea that $39 tickets were offered, did they offer 5 of those? Did they offer 10 of those? Was there 1,000 of those? It's difficult to say why people didn't get access to those tickets, because you don't know how many were actually available. Couple that with the fact that it's been reported at least once by the New York Attorney General that on average, only about 46% of tickets ever actually make it to sale to the public. The rest are dispersed behind the scenes to sometimes directly to ticket brokers. This notion that brokers get tickets only by using bots is false. They have direct relationships with teams and venues. They legally acquire tickets often. But anyway, so the point being, we don't have any transparency into how many tickets go for sale. We don't know how many are priced at $39, how many are segmented into the $50 price range or into the $800 price range.
We'll work on that.
Yeah, and I would also add the other thing that is important is this, the primary market's use of market-based pricing. So if you think about the secondary market, it's market-based pricing. Where supply meets demand is where the price point comes on the secondary market. Primary ticket sellers like Ticketmaster are now offering official platinum seats, which if you read the description is just tickets that have been held back from sale from the general public and are now being put on sale at the market rate by the primary sellers. So it's essentially their way of using the secondary sales prices on the primary market. The opposition to this bill, I believe, is not driven by a need to control price or a need to essentially eliminate resale. It's an opposition based on the fact that they will lose control because consumers will assume that control later on.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you for coming and testifying. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, does anyone else